If you were asked to picture yogurt, I'll wager the first image in your mind is of a neat little plastic tub in a supermarket chiller, perhaps with a cheerful strawberry on the lid and a tiny corner where you can tip in crunchy granola. Now imagine instead a smoked, hide-covered tent pitched on the edge of the Arctic tundra, a reindeer tethered nearby, and inside, hanging from the rafters like sausages, a row of carefully sewn intestines bulging not with meat, but with fermenting milk. Congratulations! You've just stumbled across one of the least known but most extraordinary food traditions in the world – reindeer yogurt. It sounds improbable, doesn't it? Reindeer yogurt. Who knew reindeer even gave milk, let alone that anyone would attempt to milk them, put that milk into a reindeer's own intestine, and then hang it up like a Christmas stocking? Yet that is exactly what the Sami of northern Scandinavia, the Nenets of Russia, and the Dukkha herders of Mongolia did, and in some cases still do. And once you know the Arctic, it begins to make a kind of sense. In a place where vegetables are an exotic rumour, where winters last 9 months, or even cows would look around despairingly and ask to be put on the next flight to Tuscany, you take nutrition wherever you can get it. Welcome, cheese and dairy enthusiasts. Whether you're all about Gouda, goat cheese, or a classic cheddar, we're here to share the love of all things dairy with you. So, sit back, relax, and get ready for a fun, cheesy experience. Reindeer milk, as it turns out, is astonishing stuff. Imagine whole milk from a cow, but concentrate it to triple strength. That's reindeer milk. Somewhere between cream and custard before you've even done anything to it. It contains up to 20% fat and more than 9% protein, which means that one modest cup provides the caloric equivalent of a pub lunch. The calves, who need to double their weight in short Arctic summers, slurp it like a growth potion. For humans, a mere dribble can transform a pot of porridge into something hearty enough to face an Arctic winter. A reindeer, bless it, produces only a trickle of milk each day, sometimes barely a teacup's worth. To obtain a litre of milk, you might need to cajole, tether, and gently milk half a dozen does for several days running. Imagine the patience involved. Milking reindeer is not like milking cows. Cows are generally docile and biddable. Reindeer, on the other hand, are semi-wild, easily startled, and rather inclined to express their displeasure with their hooves. And yet, for centuries, herders rose before dawn, tied the reindeer in a circle, and managed to coax out their thimblefuls of milk. What they did next was nothing short of ingenious. Some milk was drunk fresh, often stirred into tea or eaten with berries. But because refrigeration was unknown and milk spoils quickly, Arctic people developed ways of preserving it. One way was to mix it with wild herbs, sorrel leaves, or angelica stems and let it ferment slowly in a wooden tub. After a few days, it transformed into a tart, creamy yogurt-like dish called juobmo or guompa. Another was to pour the milk into a cleaned intestine, tie off the ends, and hang it in the smoky warmth of the tent. Weeks later, when opened, it yielded a tangy, firm cheese that could last all winter. To a Sami family in the middle of February, this was nothing short of alchemy. Yogurt, which most of us regard as a modern supermarket convenience, was for Arctic people a literal lifeline. By turning scant drops of milk into something storable, portable, and digestible, they gave themselves a fighting chance against some of the harshest conditions on Earth. Now, here's the thing about fermentation. It is at once simple and baffling. On one level, it's just leaving food alone until it changes. But the miracle is what it changes into. Leave milk out in most parts of the world, and what you get is a stinking mess that sends you running for the nearest sink. Leave reindeer milk out in a Sami lavu tucked neatly into a reindeer's stomach or birch bark container with a handful of chopped sorrel, and you wake up to a creamy, tangy, spoonful delight that not only doesn't kill you, but actually nourishes you. How on earth did anyone first think this was a good idea? Was it an accident? Milk left behind in a vessel discovered later by a brave soul whose hunger outweighed their caution? Or was it a slow process of observation? A careful noticing that sour milk seemed to sit in the stomach more agreeably than fresh? Whatever the origin, the Arctic peoples made an art of it. Consider the tools. Wooden bowls carved from birch, Their surfaces naturally homed bacteria that encouraged the milk to sour. Reindeer intestines that served as nature's perfect sausage casings, tough, flexible, and impermeable to pests. The smoky, slightly warm air inside a tent that acted like a rustic incubator. Everything about the environment was stacked against survival, yet somehow every element could be turned to advantage. And the taste? Well, that depends on who you ask. For a Sami child in 1800, a bowl of juobmo stirred with a handful of cloudberries would have been as eagerly anticipated as an ice cream sundae. For an unsuspecting tourist today, the tang might come as a shock. Sharp, herbaceous, with a curious echo of the reindeer's moss diet. But much like strong cheese or pungent fish sauce, once your palate adjusts, it's strangely addictive. Meanwhile, in Siberia, the Yakuts were busy with their own dairy wizardry. They didn't milk reindeer much, but they did milk horses again. Not the obvious choice if you've ever tried to stand near a horse's hind legs with a bucket. Out of this came kumis, a lightly alcoholic, fizzy yogurt drink made by continuously adding mare's milk to a fermenting barrel. The Yakuts held entire festivals around it, splashing it skyward to honor the sun, passing great carved goblets of it from hand to hand. Imagine that, a people whose year's great spiritual celebration centered not on wine, not on beer, but on a kind of effervescent horse yogurt. It all raises the most delightful question: why dairy and why here? In a world with so little abundance, why go to such trouble to coax drops of milk from unwilling animals and then laboriously ferment them? The answer, of course, lies in nutrition. A mere sip of reindeer milk delivers a blast of calories and nutrients. Add fermentation and you extend its life, reduce the troublesome lactose, and gain a cocktail of vitamins you'd otherwise struggle to find north of the Arctic Circle. Fermentation wasn't just a culinary choice, it was a survival strategy, dressed up as cuisine. Reindeer yogurt wasn't only food, it was medicine, it was ceremony, and above all, it was security against famine. To an Arctic herder, a pouch of fermenting milk wasn't odd or quaint, it was insurance, tucked safely above the smoke against the long, lean months to come. The more you peer into the story of reindeer yogurt, the more it begins to look like a grand puzzle box, each layer revealing a new, improbable twist. Take the actual act of milking, for instance. If you've ever tried to milk a cow, and I recommend it only if you have a fondness for mud, manure, and being swatted in the face by a tail, you know it can be tricky. Now imagine doing the same thing with a reindeer, which is smaller and disinclined to stand still. Herders would tether the does in a circle at dawn, often with calves nearby to keep them calm, and then proceed carefully with a small wooden pail. At best, each doe might yield a quarter of a cup. At worst, she'd deliver a sharp kick and a look that suggested you just violated every known boundary of animal etiquette. Yet families did this daily through the summer months. Children were drafted in too. If you were 6 years old in a nomadic Sami camp, you weren't watching cartoons. You were squatting in the grass at sunrise attempting to steady a reindeer while your mother coaxed out the morning's precious ration. One traveller noted that the resulting milk was so thick it was almost yogurt straight from the udder, and so rich that stirring in a spoonful of berries turned it into a pudding fit for royalty. Once milked, the question became what to do with it. A cup of fresh reindeer milk was a luxury, yes, but it wouldn't last long. So ingenuity stepped in. Some was boiled gently to make curds. Some was poured into birch bark buckets and blended with herbs for fermentation. And some, as we've seen, were funneled into lengths of intestine, sewn shut and hung like peculiar Christmas stockings from the smoke-darkened poles of the tent. It's worth pausing to imagine that scene. A family huddled around a fire, a pot bubbling with stew, and above them, dangling in the gloom, sausages of milk slowly thickening into cheese. To the outsider, it might look grotesque. To the insider, it looks like security and comfort, like shelves lined with jam jars in an English pantry. And then, of course, there was the cheese itself. Dense, tangy, chewy, with a hint of smoke from its months above the fire. Some cheeses were left soft, eaten within days. Others were aged, hardening into bricks that could be gnawed through the winter. In Finland and Lapland, They even developed what's now known as leperjuusto, or bread cheese, so called because it squeaks between your teeth and can be toasted like a slice of bread. Made from reindeer milk, it was extraordinarily rich, so rich that in some households a single small wedge was enough to flavour a whole pot of porridge. Not every reindeer herding culture did this. Anthropologists discovered that while the Sami in Scandinavia made cheeses and yogurts, the Nenets on the Yamal Peninsula often did not bother with milking at all. To them, reindeer were transport and meat. Why the difference? Well, no one knows for sure. Perhaps it was cultural preference. Perhaps the sheer hassle of milking outweighed the gains. And so we find ourselves with another mystery. How is it that two people, facing the same frozen environment, made such different choices with the same animal? Reindeer yogurt is not inevitable. It is not a biological given, but a fragile contingent, and therefore all the more fascinating. One of the pleasures of looking at these Arctic food traditions is noticing how they overlap with ritual and belief. Milk was never just milk. In many camps, before anyone drank, a spoonful would be flicked into the fire as an offering to the household spirit. This wasn't mere superstition. It was a way of acknowledging dependence on forces larger than yourself, on the reindeer, on the land, on luck itself. In Siberia, the Yakutes carried this to splendid extremes during their Uhuk festival, held at the summer solstice. Picture it, an entire community gathered under the endless daylight, goblets of frothy kumis raised, elders sprinkling it to the four directions as prayers for fertility and prosperity. Here, fermented milk became both champagne and sacrament. Reindeer milk, too, had its medicinal side. Sami lore tells us it could soothe stomach troubles. Evenki herders used it as a poultice for frostbite. Science, centuries later, nods approvingly at high fat content to insulate skin, probiotic bacteria to ease digestion. In a world without pharmacies, the reindeer provided not just transport, not just meat, but a veritable apothecary in its milk. One has to admire the thoroughness of it all. But by the middle of the 20th century, the practice was fading. Store-bought powdered milk arrived in remote shops. Boarding schools drew children away from summer camps, interrupting the chain of knowledge passed from mother to daughter. A Sami elder recalled that by the late 1960s, his family had stopped milking reindeer altogether, relying instead on cows or packaged milk from town. The intestine sausages disappeared from the tent rafters, replaced by cartons of homogenized cow's milk. It is a melancholy thought. Centuries of adoption slipping away in the space of a generation, undone by convenience. And yet, traditions rarely die completely. They hibernate, waiting for revival. In recent years, indigenous food projects have deliberately sought to preserve and teach these old methods. Elders demonstrate how to tie off an intestine pouch, or how to steep angelica stems in milk until it curdles pleasantly. Chefs, ever eager for novelty, have dabbled too, serving reindeer milk sorbet with cloudberries in chic Nordic restaurants, or infusing creme fraiche with herbs in imitation of joabmo. One Norwegian entrepreneur even experimented with distilling a spirit from fermented reindeer whey, an idea so audacious you almost wish it would catch on, if only for the bragging rights. Food traditions are never static. They bend, they vanish, they reappear in altered forms. What was once a necessity, hanging intestine sausages of milk to ward off hunger, can become, generations later, a delicacy sampled by curious tourists at a festival. There is both sadness and resilience in that transformation. And so we arrive at our fourth understanding, folded neatly into the story. Reindeer yogurt is not merely about nutrition or survival. It is about memory, identity, and the curious human habit of turning necessity into culture. So where does this leave us? We began with an image that seemed almost absurd. Yogurt made from reindeer milk dangling in intestines in a smoky tent. Along the way, we discovered that this improbable food was at once nourishment, medicine, and ritual, and that it depended on an almost heroic degree of patience from people who had precious little margin for error. Think about it. Every part of the process brims with ingenuity. Milking an animal that would frankly rather be doing anything else. Collecting drops so concentrated that even fresh they resemble custard. Mixing in leaves of wild sorrel or stems from angelica, herbs chosen not just for flavor, but because they carried the right microbes and vitamins. Storing the result in ingenious vessels, birch bark, wooden tubs, stitched reindeer stomachs that turned the harsh environment into a natural larder. And finally, consuming it with reverence, sometimes with berries, sometimes with blessings to the fire or sky. It is easy to dismiss such practices as quaint, the stuff of folklore museums. But pause a moment and you realize they carry a deeper lesson. Fermentation is, after all, controlled transformation, taking what is fragile and fleeting and turning it into something enduring. That is what Arctic people did with their milk, and arguably with their very way of life. In a world that offered them so little, they found ways to make plenty. The thing that makes reindeer yogurt more than a curiosity, it is a story of resilience. It tells us that human survival has always depended on creativity as much as on strength. That we are, at heart, a species of tinkerers, finding in the most unlikely places the means to thrive. Yogurt in intestines, kumis fizzing in barrels, cheese curds squeaking between teeth, all are variations on the same theme: the refusal to accept scarcity as destiny. Today, as chefs reimagine these foods and scientists marvel at their nutrition, the circle closes. One that looked like an oddity was in fact a survival tool. It doubled as medicine and ritual, knitting communities together. It was never inevitable. Its very existence was a fragile cultural choice. Put together, they offer a comprehensive picture of ingenuity at the edge of the habitable world. So, next time you peel back the lid on a supermarket yogurt, spare a thought for the reindeer, the birch bark tubs, and the patient hands that turned thimbles of milk into lifelines. Food, in the end, is never just about eating. It is about memory, about adaptation, about the endless human knack for making life not merely survivable, but, against all odds, worth celebrating. If you're enjoying this creamy content, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. Believe it or not, 99% of our viewers haven't hit that subscribe button yet. It's totally free and just takes a second. We've got tons of cool stuff coming your way, and in the meantime, leave a comment down below, share your thoughts with us. Your support helps us to keep exploring and uncovering the hidden side of what we eat. So don't be shy, hit that subscribe button and age like a fine cheese.